Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Teacher Training Academy webinar. We can see that people are joining. So feel free to use the chat and let us know if you can hear us, or especially if you can hear me for the time being, and then Camille later on. Evelyn, good morning from Lima, Peru. Good morning.
Hello.
Nice to have
Peru.
you.
Tunisia, right,
So
fantastic.
we'll wait a minute or two for the people to join, and then we will start.
And Vietnam, Canada, great. So really global audience, we would say.
Yeah. Natalia, what's the weather like in Canada right now?
A little bit colder than in Tunisia, I suppose. And Bolivia, right. Peru again. Kosovo, Pakistan, Argentina. So that would be good morning for Argentina, I suppose.
Probably the same as in Moscow. Poland, Peru.
So Brazil. Argentina midday. All right, so not good morning, right? So that's like 5 hours, I suppose. And Czech Republic, Paraguay. Great.
So nice to have international group of people, Ukraine and Italy. Okay, so let's start. My name is Bartłomiej Janiak. I'm the founder of the Teacher Training Academy. So this is our third webinar of the whole program for the 2023. And if we have a look at the agenda, this is the third webinar where Camille will take us through speaking skills, how to develop speaking skills when you prepare towards Pearson English International Certificate. Pay attention to our next sessions and all the sessions, and we finish in November. This will be the last time we'll see the Teacher Training Academy in 2023. Please remember that there are two strands, and once you complete either the computer-based test master or computer-based test teaching expert, you can earn a Credly badge for your professional development. And all of you can download the digital notebook from the official Teacher Training Academy website. You'll have all the webinars, all the abstracts. You'll have my takeaway notes, editable plays, and there's also an optional homework in every webinar that I hope that you'll have a chance to experiment with, and Camille will refer to his optional homework by the end of the webinar. And there is also one question that I aim to spark your interest and curiosity. Feel free to answer it in your own time. And by the end of this session, you'll get from me an email with a link to a survey and a certificate. So pay attention, it will come to you within the next few days. And I guess that would be the very basic intro. Camille, over to you. Developing speaking skills and computer-based test. Enjoy the session.
Great. Thank you, Bartek. It's very nice to have you in my session. So we're going to discuss today speaking skills for computer-based test. Instead of the agenda for today, I'm going to show you the structure of a computer-based test, what kind of task for Pearson English International Certificate the test takers can expect. And we'll be focusing on part one of the test, which is listening and speaking. And today we'll be focusing on the tasks that involve speaking skills. So those will be read aloud, that involves reading and speaking, describe image, that involves speaking only, listen and repeat, speaking and listening, and then listening to the conversation and passage comprehension. So these 5 tasks, they involve speaking and they test speaking skills. And these are the tasks that we're going to look at one by one, discussing the structure, discussing the items that are scored, the traits that are scored, and discussing some activities that will help our students get ready for these speaking tasks in the computer-based test. Remember that you have this chat box there in Zoom, so If you have any questions, feel free to use them. There's also a Q&A box for some questions that you want me to answer. I will address those Q&A questions after the session. So let's start with read aloud. The first task, obviously, well, as the name says, it involves both reading and speaking. So this is two skills in combination. This is actually what happens in this test in most tasks, right? The skills are tested in combination just to reflect what we do in our native languages in real life. In real life, we typically do not use skills separately. We combine them. That's why in most tasks, skills, especially speaking tasks, skills are tested in combination, because this is this kind of oral interaction that is tested. You have to understand something, and then you produce some speaking passage. So let's have a look at read aloud, what it's like, right? So as simple as it gets, right? The taker reads aloud a sentence or a short text. So they can see in the test, they can see a short text that might be a sentence. For lower levels, higher levels will have a short text, and they have 40 seconds to look through it, prepare, and read out. And this what they read aloud is being recorded by the equipment, by the electronic equipment. So what are the traits scored in read aloud? So in what way does the artificial intelligence assess the production, the speaking, the spoken production? So there will be three traits that are scored. This is content, oral fluency, and pronunciation. And I'd like to stop for a moment at pronunciation and discuss this trait. We'll be discussing each trait today, because these are the traits that are scored with every speaking task. So let's stop here, pronunciation. And my question to you, right? What do you think when it comes to pronunciation? What are the aspects of it that you think are scored here? So what are the elements of pronunciation that might be scored? Use your chat box, feel free to share your ideas. So so intonation, all right, thank you, Miriam. Final sounds, right, Yang, stress, accent, stress and intonation, tone. Okay, to pronounce words rightly with clarity. Thank you, Hafiz. So as a matter of fact, those elements, you were quite right, most of you. So when it comes to pronunciation, the elements that are assessed, there are elements that are, well, analyzed by artificial intelligence algorithms that Lottie talked about some time ago in the academy. These are vowels and consonants. Are they pronounced properly? So the sounds, the basic sounds of English. Then words and phrases and the stress, right? So word level stress and sentence level stress, is it correct? So this is another element that is assessed. And the third element, some kind of general, also connected with intonation. Is it easily understandable, right? Is this speech clear and easily understandable or not? That's the question. So let's turn to some strategies for our students. So some strategies to apply while taking, especially this part of the test, read aloud. And the strategies that we, the teachers, we might assist our students to develop. So it's important that they use punctuation or grammar to identify pauses, to make this speech, this text that is read aloud, to make it natural. So not only punctuation, but also some grammar will give the idea of how to organize the text, where to put pauses. They should also apply letter sound knowledge, and this is the teacher's task, to help them with that. Research shows that around 85% of sounds in English and spelling in English is actually regular, right? So there is a regular relationship between the letter and sound. although obviously we typically focus and concentrate on those irregularities, there are a lot of irregularities. They can there are methods they can use to get to know how to read particular letters, particular spelling, and this is the teacher's role to help them with that. So they should place the test takers should place emphasis on keywords in the text, do not emphasize grammar words. This is how the language works. Some words are pronounced in a weak form, some words are emphasized more, and to give good rhythm of the language, they should be aware, and this is the teacher's task to show them that. And linking between words inside phrases, another important element that is natural of native way of speaking. And this is also another element that we help them with, showing them the places where the text can be linked. So what about the activities that could be used, and we could take them into our classroom? I'm going to show a few activities today, which most of them will be based actually on the coursework, on classic books that you can use in your classroom, and the way you can adapt some activities from the book to develop those strategies that we have been discussed. So the first thing, read aloud. Remember, you in your coursework, you have a lot of short reading comprehension activities that could be very good material for some practice for read aloud. So you can take some short pieces of reading comprehension activities, and you can use them to practice all those things that I have mentioned. So why not together with your students divide texts into thought groups, show them how natural pauses should appear and where natural pauses should appear, like one cold day in the city, passes by, notice a young girl standing on the main street. So not only the punctuation, not only the comma, but also some grammar that indicates some natural pauses in a text that they read out. And this is what you can do with, the material you get from your course books that you use in your classroom. Also, together with your students, mark the words that can be linked, especially those consonants and vowels within phrases. So show them that naturally you don't say passers by notice a young girl, but notice a young girl, right? So this is like one word, because there is a lot of linking between consonants, vowels, between words. So work with your students, show them those places based on some short reading passages from your course books. Another important element to sound natural is this weak forms. So again, take those texts and work with them, show them which words are typically non-emphasized, which words are typically pronounced with weak forms, and show them that. And doesn't sound natural when it's and, that it should be in a weak form, and all those words, typically grammar words that are pronounced in a weak way. Remember that in coursework material, especially Pearson coursework material, you have a lot of good material for pronunciation practice. So, for example, Roadmap is great for that. It has this extra additional pronunciation section, so you will find a lot of activities there for practicing weak forms, linking between words, individual sounds. The same story for Speak Out, which is the pronunciation sections are incorporated into the units. This is not a separate section, but also provides a lot of great material for practicing all those features of pronunciation. You have to remember that this test is taken in a digital environment, which means that, simply speaking, they have to speak to the equipment, to the microphone, to a computer. And they might not be used to that. I mean, they are used to that because most of your students are digital natives, obviously, or if not all of your students are digital natives, I suppose. But they are used to this digital environment when it comes to interaction in their native languages, but not necessarily English. The interaction that they are used to is most probably peer-to-peer in a classroom, or teacher with the teacher in the classroom. So they might not be used to this interaction in English in this digital environment. So that's why this is something we as teachers should consider when preparing for computer-based tests. That's why I suggest the good idea would be to have your students prepare and record voice messages. Generally, recording things on their smartphones is the easiest, the best way to introduce them into this interaction with the microphone in English, not in their native language. So obviously there are many books that introduce this idea, just like as you can see here, roadmap in this mediation mediation extension. They introduce this voice message that can be recorded, but you can do it obviously on your own anytime that you, for example, have something they have to give answers as homework, right? Why don't they record them, right? And they send you the recording by email from the mobile phones, and this way they learn this to interact with an equipment in English, right? Also, a great thing, a great tool for especially read aloud, but generally for pronunciation, is this voice-to-text feature that every smartphone has these days, and a lot of applications, a lot of text editing programs, they have this voice-to-text feature. Why not use it? So, for example, you can take the short texts or short reading comprehension tasks that I mentioned some time ago, and you can ask your students to, well, record these passages using this voice to text feature in their smartphones. And they can then compare the version, the original version, and the version produced by the smartphone through this voice-to-text feature. There are also a lot of services online, for example, Go Transcript, where you can actually compare the two texts. So the original text plus the text produced by the smartphone based on the dictation, I would say, from the student. And the very often you have the rate of similarity, how similar the text is. And through this, they can, on their own, right? You don't even have to do much here. You can only give them motivation, but they, on their own, they can check how accurate the pronunciation is, how well the voice-to-text feature recognizes the pronunciation as English. So they can use it to monitor the progress with a little bit of spur on your side, I would say. And a little bit fun, element of fun here for reading aloud, some activities. In most course books, you will one day you will come across a unit that discusses cinema, entertainment, performance. So if you have a unit like that, so you can see example of units discussing these ideas from roadmap, speak out, and gold experience. If you have a unit discussing that, why not play a game with your students? So the game that they can play in a very simple game, you just have to, well, from the internet, you can, or on the internet, you can find some famous movie quotes, and you can prepare a list of famous movie quotes, and the students in pairs will be asked to read aloud one to another famous movie quotes, and obviously the other student's task will be to guess what movie it is. So there is a lot of read aloud, and also an element of competition and a little bit of fun in it. So I'm sorry. Let's turn to another task. Listen and repeat. And again, as you can see from the name, this is a task which combines listening and speaking, as a matter of fact. So skills are tested in combination. And in this task, the student or the test taker simply listens to a sentence and a short text, or a short text, depending on the level, and then they repeat it. As simple as that, right? So no specific complicated or complex elements, just listening to a sentence or a short text and repeating it. And the trait score, as I mentioned, these are 3 traits. This is content, obviously, how exact, right? How precise this repetition is, pronunciation that we have already discussed, and oral fluency. So this is the time to discuss oral fluency a little bit. And again, my question is, and use the chat box, please, for that. What would you say? What would be the elements of oral fluency, that elements that are analyzed by this artificial intelligence that analyzes the performance here? So what about it? Could you share your ideas? I'm looking, so talking and rhythm, or in rhythm. Thank you, Hafiz. Great, fantastic. And other ideas, oral fluency, what it involves: voiceless pauses, speed, pauses, intonation, right? Yes. From Natalia, thank you, Natalia. And Miriam mentioned voiceless pauses, and Alicia, avoid hesitation. All right. Stress, Muhammad, speak naturally and smoothly, intonation, tone of voice, wind. Right, so again, very close, most of you, because, well, the elements that are analyzed here is rhythm, phrasing, and stress. Are they smooth? So, so the intonation would go into this phrasing element of oral fluency. Then constant and natural rate of speech is it natural rate? Is it constant? Is it appropriate phrasing? Is there appropriate phrasing and hesitations, repetitions, and false start? Are they present? If yes, they will obviously take the score down. So these are the elements analyzed by artificial intelligence. So a little bit about the strategies again for listen and repeat. So here we have listening and speaking combined. So a little bit about listening, although it will be discussed a little bit later in our Teachers Academy, listening, but obviously here it will play a role in this task. That's why a little bit about it. So it's important that the students, the test takers, focus on understanding and reconstructing what is heard, not mechanical repetition. If you take, for example, the app prepared for Pearson English International Certificate, and you will take this listen and repeat, and you will be trying, do that, right? Try to repeat a sentence of, let's say, 10 words, and you'll be trying to repeat it mechanically, like word for word, without actually getting inside the sentence. It would be really, really hard. You will stop after 4 or 5 words, most probably, of mechanical repetition, because as a matter of fact, what they should do here is listening for chunks, for groups of words, for logical phrases, and remember them, as if to say. So pay attention to sentence structure. How does it structure? Which are the elements of the sentence, rather than individual words and repeated mechanically. It's obviously not necessary to copy the accent. So if the sentence is produced with American accent and the usual way your test takers speak is, let's say, British, it's absolutely okay. They do not have to copy the accent, and they speak with their own accent, as if to say, the accent that they naturally, let's say, normally speak, right, when they speak. And it's important to pronounce words clearly. Don't forget about word and sentence stress. These are the elements that the microphone, that this AI tool will be like picking up here. So listen and repeat. repeat some material for preparation, some material for action with students. So why not have your students read sentences to each other, right? As simple as that. So for example, if you work with some pronunciation activities, I mentioned that Roadmap has great pronunciation section. Also Business Partner has great, I know, 4 or 5 pages of pronunciation activities at the end of the book, where there are all those elements practice that I mentioned earlier, like linking, also intonation, phrasing, rhythm of sentence. There are different activities practicing different aspects of those oral fluency and pronunciation features. So when you work with that, you will have a lot of material with individual sentences. And why don't use these sentences later on for students to simply read the sentences, and the other student just has to repeat it. And this way they might practice this listen and repeat. Also, this is important also for the read aloud and listen and repeat. This is important to work with individual sounds. Like, for example, minimal pairs is a great tool to work with individual sounds, because each region has some difficult English minimal pairs. So, for example, for my region, for my students, one of the difficult pairs would be this long E, like peace, and a short A, like fish. So that would be difficult for my students, for example. But obviously, in every region, you have your own minimal pair or minimal pairs that might be difficult. And well, work with them and use again the courseware to work with minimal pairs. And this is what you can find in courseware, like Speak Out or Roadmap. They work with individual sounds and they work with minimal pairs. And as a kind of extension or continuation to your work with minimal pairs, you can have some kind of competitive activity for which you will need 2 dice. Well, these would be blank or self-made. That's obviously up to you. You can actually buy those blank dice, typically used with young learners, but well, I can see that a lot of my adult students, they love playing different games with dice. So I have a set of dice like that. These are called whiteboard dice, where you can easily write and erase what you want on each face of the dice. So you can use, well, those blank dice as well. And there is a game that you can play with students, that the game that will target sounds, for example, the minimal pair, long, short, E and A. And in this game, you would need at least 3 students, right? 3, 4 is the optimum. And one of the students, on each person's turn, they will roll 2 dice. And as you can see, each face of the dice contains a word with the minimal pair, either E or A. And they roll. Group members cannot see the result of the dice roll. And this rolling student, they will read out the word on each dice, and the rest of the group, they have to guess if the sound, they decide if the words contain the same vowel sound or not, right? So this is the idea for a game in which you practice minimal pairs. You can obviously use this game and use the dice for any kind of game in which you practice individual sounds of English. Also, another idea for some, well, a little bit maybe also competitive activity, or some activity containing an element of fun to give your students some extra motivation. So you divide your students into 2 teams. One student from each team comes to the front of the room, or to the front of the group, and they get a sentence from you, right? Whatever sentence, you can take sentences from your course books. And they also receive the information, or they get information to communicate an emotion, right? Surprise, anger, frustration, disappointment, excitement, through the sentence. So they have to read out the sentence, and they have to show emotions. So that means working with the intonation, with the rhythm of the sentence to, well, make the members of my team guess the emotion that I'm trying to convey. And obviously you can make it competitive, so you can give the same sentences to different teams, and well, the teams will compete for how fast they can complete the task, right? So how fast they will guess all the sentences and all the emotions that the team members were to convey. So working on intonation and a little bit of competition. Also, nice activity, also good for dictation. That will be discussed when listening and writing is discussed. When you take very short passages from your course books, you can use them for a version of Chinese whispers game, in which you put students in a row or somehow next one to another. The first student gets the text and they have to read out the text, and this text is repeated one by one along the row until it reaches the last student who puts down the text, and it might be timed, for example, and the first team to finish are the winners, plus you can give some penalty points for some mistakes, for example, in the written version of the task. So that brings me to the third task, speaking task. This is only speaking task, so it doesn't combine any other skills. This is, well, that might combine visual skills because they have to look at an image, but this is pure speaking, I would say, without any listening on or writing. Describe image is as simple as it can be. So, well, the students have to describe an image. They have 25 seconds to prepare. So they look at a photograph or a picture, 25 seconds to prepare, and they describe what they see. They have 25 seconds, lower levels, A1, A2, or 40 seconds, higher levels, B1 to C2, to describe the image. So as simple as that. Obviously, again, everything is being recorded. Everything is done in front of some electronic equipment, so a microphone or a computer. So the traits that are scored here are again the same traits. This is oral fluency that we have already discussed. This is pronunciation. We have already discussed the elements of pronunciation that are analyzed by artificial intelligence, and content. This content element is especially important for the image description. There is a question from Evelyn whether you get the recording of the session. As far as I know, the recording will be available, but Bartek will contact you about it just after.
Okay, all the sessions are added to the Teacher Training Academy website, and the recordings are there.
Right. And there's a question from Natalia, how many seconds they have for the answers? So once again, they have 25 seconds to get ready. And then lower levels, A1, A2, they have 25 seconds to produce the image description, and higher levels, B1, B2, C1, and C2, they have 40 seconds to produce this description. So coming back to this trait content that is scored by artificial intelligence, and again, my question here is, what would you say if you were to program artificial intelligence? What aspects of content, or what aspects the artificial intelligence should analyze, should take into consideration when giving score for picture description? So what would it be? What do you think? What does it mean, content? If you could share your ideas in the chat box, what do I mean, or what does artificial intelligence mean by content when analyzing picture description? What's happening? Great, Natalia, thank you. Yeah, you're all right. Yes, as you will see, contrast and comparison. Okay, right, that for Mariam, thank you. Sandra, the main idea. You are absolutely right. Inferring, yeah, that's a good point. We will talk about it. So from Sandra, so the gist, also situation, full description. From Alicia, thank you. vocabulary on the topic. Yes, it is also somehow tested as vocabulary. Okay, so let's have a look. Deducting, right? Or deducing. You will see that you are right, Jorge, in a moment. So the artificial intelligence, that is analyzing, will ask the question if all aspects and elements of the image are addressed. So are all the details discussed? Which means also, well, some of you mentioned vocabulary, right? So this way, vocabulary will be necessary because the test taker will have to name a lot of elements in the picture, and this way, this vocabulary element plays a role in this content trait. So are all aspects and elements of the image addressed? Does the response deal with all parts of the image, the main idea? Some of you mentioned that, the main detail plus some supporting details. Are all those elements present in this description? Plus, higher levels, they will be scored on discussing some relationships, possible developments of the situation, also some conclusions, implications. So these are also the elements of content that are analyzed by. So some of you mentioned inference, for example, or deducing. So this is also tested for higher levels. Obviously, starting from B1, they are expected to also conclude, give some implications, relationships, the possible developments. So strategies for picture description, well, they have to analyze the image and ask questions about it. As many questions in the head, the more questions, the better. So this is our task. So teachers' task to help them develop this strategy of asking as many questions as possible about each picture they see. A good strategy to go logically from the main detail to the smaller details, supporting details. So this is good for organizing this description and producing really good descriptions this way. Full sentences and showing a range of vocabulary, especially for lower levels, where they have this tendency to produce individual phrases, not complete sentences. So this is where we can help the teachers, where we can help work with them and show them some typical sentences that they can use when describing pictures, so that they can build full sentences, like in the middle, I can see this and this, in the background, there is this and this, instead of just giving individual phrases. And obviously, they should be trained to give as many details as possible, because this is tested as far as the content is concerned. Linking devices, especially for higher levels, we should equip them with some discourse markers, some linking devices that are very helpful to join ideas, to make it a smooth talk, this picture description. And speculation, right? Looking for some, as I mentioned, possible developments, some inferences, some deduction, as has been mentioned. So these are the strategies to develop for picture description. And as far as some activities are concerned, we should remember, right, that the courseware that we use contains a lot of great material for describe image part. We typically do not notice a lot of it because, well, just like, for example, what you can see on the left are pages from a roadmap. So most pictures that you find in courseware are used just to introduce the topic. Sometimes they are referred later on in the course book, but typically they are just to introduce the mood of the topic, to show some to help students imagine they are in different situations, for example. But you can find a lot of great picture for description. So have your students work with those pictures that are typically neglected and ask as many questions as possible. So you take pictures from a course book anytime there are some pictures there. So train your students to ask as many questions as possible. Where is he? What is he holding? What you can see in the background? What you can see in the middle of the picture? How does he feel, right, for higher levels, to speculate a little bit? What is he going to do next? So train your students to be ready to ask, an infinite number of questions about any picture they see, well, for example, in their course book. time your students when they're describing pictures. Anytime there's any picture description activity, because this is another skill they need. They have to know how long it takes really to speak for 25 seconds or speak to 40 seconds, and how many details can go into this period of time. So introduce this element of time, because this is a timed activity, and this time factor is important here, because the microphone switches off after 40 seconds or 25 seconds, and if the description is not complete, that's bad for them. The score can be taken down. And well, use those pictures that you can find in your course books, on your courseware. For example, Gold Experience also has a great section at the end of the book with plenty of very good pictures for description. So use those images that you have in your course books for some, well, competitive activities. What I would suggest as a competitive activity to try and do in your class would be an activity in which students work in pairs, right? So you have student A and B, and you give student A picture taken from your course book, for example, right? And you ask the student to work out, for example, 10 questions. This is up to you, depends on the picture, depends on how much time you have, but let's say 10 is a good number, because we want, as I said, we want to train students to ask as many questions as possible, because the more questions they will be able to ask about the picture, the more detailed the description in the exam or in the test will be later on. So then when they have the questions ready, the student A shows the picture to student B for 1 minute, right? And after this 1 minute, could be half a minute, depends on, well, how complicated the picture is, student A conceals the picture, and student B's task is to answer the questions without looking at the picture. So a simple idea, but introduces the element of competition a little bit, extra motivation, extra fun in a classroom live. And student A can get points to make it competitive, can get points for each unanswered question, for example. So that will be extra motivation to make those questions really detailed, right? So this way they practice asking really detailed questions, which will be very profitable later on in the test. And another idea for a competitive activity, a card game, yeah, that's my favorite activity for pictures, which is actually an activity that is good for many different exam tasks. So for describing image, you would have to prepare a list of discourse markers for describing image. So some linking devices to describe image, and you cut out those cards that you have prepared, and you get a pile of cards. Each card contains one linking device for picture description, and you deal out the cards to a group of students. 3, 4 is the best number. So each student gets a handful of cards with linking devices, and the idea is to play a card game in which they have to get rid of the cards as quickly as possible, but they can get rid of a card only if they produce a sentence containing the linking device from the card and relating to the picture that will be there in the middle of the game. So they, well, are trying to quickly produce some sentences describing the picture that they can see, and at the same time getting rid of the cards that they have. And again, a little bit of competition, a little bit of fun, a very nice activity to equip them with those linking devices that I mentioned, because especially for higher levels, that will be very important to make it smooth talk. These linking devices will be very important for describing the image. And the last 2 tasks that involve a little bit of speaking, these are mainly listening tasks, because this is, as you can see, listen to the conversation and passage comprehension. So this is mostly listening, but still they have to, as you will see, they have to answer orally, right? So listen to the conversation, they listen to short conversation and answer a question about the conversation. And passage comprehension, another task for similar mechanics, I would say. So they listen to a short passage. This is only higher levels from B1 upwards, and they have to answer comprehension questions with a short spoken response. So not a lot of speaking, mostly listening, right? The scoring is based on correct, incorrect system, which will assess whether they are able to answer questions appropriately, they are understood, and they can accurately assess what is going on in the interaction or in the passage. So here, obviously, as far as speaking is concerned, it's important that the answers are short, right? Short phrases, even individual words. The shorter the phrase is, the better. Or I would say the longer the answer is, the worse for them, because there is always a chance to make a mistake. And here they don't have to produce long passages, just a short answer to the point. And they should speak at normal volume, pronounce clearly. Still, this pronunciation issue is important, because this is what is analyzed by artificial intelligence. And obviously they don't have to copy the accent. And again, this is something they might not be used to, like recording their answers, talking to the microphone, giving short spoken answers, but answers that are recorded by a microphone. So why not somehow adapt some activities to help them get used to this digital environment? And you can take any listening comprehension task that you have in your coursework with short answers, and why don't you get your students record their answers as homework? For example, you can send them the listening for homework, and the task will be to record their answers. Then they can share the recordings for peer correction. You can provide the key, you can monitor, you can give feedback and focus on pronunciation. So this recording element would be very important to help them get used to this the equipment that they will have in front of them while taking this computer-based test. And what about your ideas? I have selected, well, one page that is actually in pieces, but this is one page from Unit 1A, Speak Out B1. Let's have a look, and if you could share in the chat box, share your ideas on how you can adapt, what you can do to use these activities in the coursework specifically for computer-based tests, based on what we discussed for speaking in a computer-based test. So have you gotten ideas? Share with us in the chat box. Look at it for a moment, and maybe we'll have one or two ideas. Right. Now, as you can see, right. Yeah, great. So from Yulia, we have an idea. Right. For example, you have short readings here. So immediately you can see that immediately we have short passages that that are great material for recording. For example, you ask them to record or to use the voice to text feature in their smartphones, so that they can like practice and check how well, how much the pronunciation or the English is recognized by the machine, which is not obviously ideal, right? The machine is not ideal, but as long as they get 90% similarity, that's a great result. And then, for example, use the highlighted, thank you, Laura, using the highlighted phrases for showing them connected speech. Right, so to be for mingling students, having students ask other students for their answers, write them down, speak out aloud, right? So read out aloud from Alicia, thank you. Also, look at this listening here, right, that you have, and you have short, listen and match the short passage. Thank you, Mariam. You have short answers here, so why not ask your students to record it? And typically you would do that in a classroom, like you play the recording, right, and they tell you the answers. You ask in particular students to give you the answer to that, but why not like send the recording to their emails, for example, so that they listen to that at home and they record their answers, and they can send this, how, depending on how many students you have, they can send the answers to you, the recordings to you for some feedback, or they can use it for some peer correction, so they can share the answers. Okay, right, you obviously have this pronunciation connected speech, which doesn't require any adaptation for speaking in the computer-based test, because well, you have ready-made activity for connected speech, which is an important element in computer-based test. So just a few takeaways from me from this session today. Remember that speaking in computer-based test is tested in most cases in combination with some other skills, with listening and reading. And as a matter of fact, because, well, this session is called Developing Speaking, but as a matter of fact, students get ready for oral interaction here. So you do not actually prepare students for speaking only, because while working with the tasks, you are preparing them for oral interaction, comprehension and production, right? So this combination of skills is an important element of computer-based test. Pearson coursework provides a lot of great material that will help your students get ready for computer-based tests, and that can be easily adapted, as you have seen, to practice some specific sub-skills for some specific tasks in the computer-based test. And last but not least, something that I mentioned a few times today, so with computer-based test speaking, especially speaking, right? Although it concerns also some the remaining skills, but speaking somehow is especially important here to remember that some students might need more exposure to digital environment. This being exposed to the equipment, to the microphone, and using foreign language might be a new situation for some of your students. So through some adapted activities, this recording thing, for example, you can easily prepare your students for that. And that's actually what my homework is about. So if you look, this is optional homework, obviously, you don't have to do that, but well, that would be very nice. So look at the homework, and in the homework, I suggest some activity through which you can well, make your students ready for this digital environment, this digital landscape, as we called it in the computer-based test. So look at the homework and think how you can perform the tasks there. And what is your test takeaway? If you share something in the chat box, this there's a question from Alicia, if this is graded. I mean, the homework, I suppose this is a question about homework. No, this is as Bartek said, this is an optional piece of homework, right? So this is just for you to somehow expand, think a little bit more about what we discussed today. So obviously you don't have to do it, so nobody, I mean, you will grade yourself, right? So that's graded by you yourself. Okay, just kidding.
Actually, Alisa, a nice point. It should be graded.
That's an idea, Bartek. We should think of some tests
at
the end of Teachers Academy, right?
And we do like grading, so the next year Academy might get graded homework.
Especially that you distribute badges, right? So there should be some effort to get the badge, right? Okay. Thank you, Yulia, right, for your takeaway. So dice pronunciation ideas, and Alicia, All right. Yes. So you will do it. Great. So thank you for your promise. Yes. We'll check it. Right. You have next session. There is next session with Bartek on the 29th of June. So Bartek might ask you about the homework if you have done it, which is something I invite you to. Would you be so kind, Bartek, and tell us the title of your session on the 29th of June?
Yeah, the next month will be on mental simulations. Actually,
Mental
this is like
simulations.
a bit of psychology within the classroom reality, how to help students envisage their potential success or failure and how they can prepare to overcome challenges on the way in the preparation course.
Okay. So
enjoy the rest of your beautiful day. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Or the beautiful evening. That depends which part of the world you were with us. So thanks a lot and enjoy computer-based tests.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.